In the fifth new year after marrying Adrian, he suddenly disappeared. Tiffany went to the police station to file a report. The officer who received her looked at the inquiry record, and his expression turned strange. You said your husband is Adrian. Then what's your name? My name is Tiffany. Is there any news about my husband? Her eyes couldn't see, and her fingers nervously twisted the hem of her clothes. The officer frowned and banged the table heavily. Madam, please cooperate with us and give us your real name. Tiffany froze. But I am Tiffany, the blonde guy behind her snorted disdainfully. Little blind girl, don't think you can impersonate someone else just because you look alike. Everyone in Harbor City knows that Mr. Adrian gifted Ms. Tiffany a yacht worth $10 billion to celebrate her pregnancy. Ms. Tiffany's social media has been posting 9 square grids daily, staying on the trending list for days. Meanwhile, the large LED screen across the way was broadcasting an interview with Adrian. Yesterday was New Year's Eve. What New Year's wish did Mr. Adrian make? Of course, I hope my beloved wife has a smooth delivery and a safe, joyful time. Thank you, hubby Tilda. Sandy's sweet, familiar voice rang out. Tiffany's scalp instantly prickled as all color drained from her face. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. 5 years ago, Tiffany was blinded in a car accident, leaving Adrian in unbearable agony. Everyone in Harbor City said the young master of the Aries family would never marry a blind woman. Some even found a college student who bore an 80% resemblance to her and secretly delivered her to his bed. Adrian nearly strangled the girl named Sandy after discovering the truth. His eyes burned crimson as he struggled to suppress the turbulent emotions surging within. Get out. My heart belongs only to Tiffany. Every woman who resembles her makes me sick. That night, he drove frantically to the hospital and clung desperately to Tiffany, scalding tears falling onto her shoulders. Baby, let's get our marriage license tomorrow. Okay, I want you to be Ari's family's rightful mistress. Everyone knew that Adrian was madly in love with her, and utterly despised Sandy. But why was it that now, standing rightfully by his side, was Sandy pretending to be Tiffany? Tiffany's heart felt like it had been torn open, letting in a howling cold wind. What on earth is going on? She was going to find Adrian and get some answers. She walked out of the police station in a daze, only to be knocked unconscious by a falling billboard, before slipping into unconsciousness. She seemed to hear a voice frantic with worry. Honey, what's wrong? As her eyes fluttered open again, Tiffany winced at the blinding white light before her. The next second, her eyes widened in shock. She had miraculously regained her sight. Before she could even take in this unfamiliar world, the voices of Adrian and his brother reached her from outside the door. Adrian, how much longer are you going to let Sandy impersonate Tiffany? It's been 5 whole years. The man let out a sigh and spoke in anguish. I don't know either. Back then, those old directors of the Aries family absolutely refused to let me marry a blind woman, but I loved Tiffany so much that I had to lie to them, saying Tiffany's eyesight had recovered, and then had Sandy pretend to be her. But now those old directors are all dead. Why are you still? Sandy is pregnant. Adrian cut him off abruptly, his tone irritated, and for some reason, after all this acting, I can't seem to live without her anymore. You're insane. His brother exclaimed in shock. You've actually developed feelings for Sandy. Have you forgotten? The drunk driver responsible for that accident years ago was Sandy's alcoholic brother. If it weren't for him, Tiffany wouldn't have lost her sight. If Tiffany finds out about all this, enough. Adrian frowned deeply. Sandy is innocent. Her brother's crimes have nothing to do with her. I've already sent that drunk to prison. He'll never get out. Tiffany rarely goes out after losing her sight. There's no signal here either. She lives in this castle I meticulously built, and will never discover the truth in this lifetime. Behind the door, Tiffany bit her lip hard, tears streaming down her face. Though the castle maintained spring-like warmth year-round, an icy chill permeated every inch of her body. She took out a stack of exquisite portraits from her bedside, all drawn by Adrian himself, depicting their shared past. The first one shows Adrian meeting her during a desert expedition, where he broke his leg and she cared for him for 3 days and nights. The third one depicts Adrian climbing a 4,000-meter snow-capped mountain alone to pick an edelweiss for her while pursuing her. The 8th photo shows how he invited all the renowned ballet masters from Northern Europe to celebrate her birthday after she mentioned loving ballet, spending billions to make it happen. The 15th frame reveals Adrian building a magnificent, safe, and comfortable castle specially designed for her life as a visually impaired person. He knelt on one knee and said, "Darling, from now on I'll be your eyes. You'll forever be the only one in my heart." The girl in the painting smiled sweetly, her eyes brimming with affection as she threw herself into his embrace. Tiffany forced a bitter smile. setting each painting aflame one by one. Then she threw them all onto the bed. Adrian, your love is tainted. I don't want it anymore. Flames roared fiercely as the fire alarm wailed hysterically. Tiffany seized the chaos to escape through another exit, finding a phone booth by the roadside to dial that mysterious number. Nick, you said I could rejoin the orchestra anytime within 5 years. Does that offer still stand? The man's deep, cello-like voice resonated. Of course, my beloved Tiffany. Your Nordic fans are heartbroken with longing for you. But my status is somewhat complicated. It'll take 3 days to process the exit formalities. How do you plan to leave Hong Kong? From what I know, Adrian won't let you go easily. Tiffany's eyes flickered. I'll give him a gift, my corpse. Adrian had someone else make the Tiffany for her, didn't he? In that case, she would vanish completely from his life. Suddenly, a pair of warm hands abruptly encircled her waist. Adrian buried his head in her shoulder, his voice trembling with fear. Darling, thank goodness you're okay. If anything had happened to you, I wouldn't want to live either, sis-in-law. Adrian thought you were still inside. He said you couldn't see and insisted on going in to find you despite the raging fire. The chandelier nearly crushed Adrian to death in there. His best friend patted his chest, his face full of lingering fear. Tiffany only then noticed, Adrian's arms were covered in burns, his clothes torn in large patches, and his eyes bloodshot from the smoke, her breath caught, her heart aching with a fine, needle-like pain. Adrian, you would risk your life for me, but why can your heart love 2 women at once? Mr. Adrian, a timid female voice came from behind. Sandy wore a white dress, dragging her suitcase with delicate fragility. Tiffany felt the hand on her waist stiffen noticeably before releasing. Adrian ruffled her hair and lied without changing expression. Honey, a business partner came to discuss something with me. Wait for me a moment. Then, he quickly stepped forward and wrapped Sandy in his arms, signing, Sandy, why did you come by yourself? Didn't I say I'd come to stay with you and the baby tonight? I missed you too much, and I wanted to come take care of Sister Tiffany to atone. It's my fault for what happened to her. Sandy replied in sign language as well. You have nothing to apologize to her for. Making you live under someone else's name, that's what I should apologize for, to you and our baby. He kissed Sandy's lips, his eyes overflowing with tenderness, then signed with his hands, I've already chosen a name for our baby. Tiffany stared blankly at this scene, her heart feeling as if it were being sliced apart piece by piece, the pain unbearable. This time last year, she found out she was pregnant. Adrian was overjoyed. He booked an entire hot spring resort and gave her a CD containing 999 love confessions he had recorded. Just as she was about to open it, he answered a phone call. Faint sobs of a girl could be heard in the background. Adrian kissed her belly and said, Sweetheart, there's an emergency at work. Wait for me to come back. Tiffany waited obediently without suspicion for a full day and night, but instead of her beloved, she was met with an avalanche. Their child died that winter. She watched as Adrian tenderly caressed Sandy's belly with that familiar gesture, and smiled bitterly. It turned out the avalanche had only ever trapped her alone. Darling, I've been quite busy lately, so I've hired a nutritionist to take care of you. Adrian held Sandy's hand, his eyes brimming with adoration. MS, Tiffany. The girl called out timidly. It was MS, Tiffany, not Mrs. Aries. Adrian frowned slightly at her form of address but didn't correct her. Tiffany's gaze lingered for a few seconds on Sandy's kiss-swollen lips, her fingertips digging into her palms. Suddenly, warmth enveloped her as Adrian draped his wool coat over Tiffany's shoulders. It's too cold outside. Let's go home, sweetheart. Before she could react, the next moment she saw Sandy give a thumbs-up gesture, receiving an affectionate kiss from the man. She watched as the two walked hand in hand ahead, inseparable in their closeness. She watched the man who supposedly detested the smell of cooking oil, putting on an apron to help Sandy prepare dishes, laughing heartily amid the roar of the kitchen exhaust fan. She watched as Adrian dutifully served her soup as always, only to personally wipe away a grain of rice from Sandy's lips the next moment. You silly little thing, how can you be this adorable? He signed with his hands. Tiffany took a sip of hot soup and hung her head low, her eyes burned with a dull ache. Yet not a single tear would fall, because she had been loved by Adrian. She recognized his familiar gestures and gaze all too well. Tiffany finally realized that he had truly fallen in love with Sandy. After dinner, the private doctor came as usual to examine Tiffany's eyes. Mr. Adrian, Dr. Chen is unavailable, so I'm here in his place. I've reviewed the case, and there's great hope for Madam's eyesight to recover as long as she continues with the medication. She stood outside the door, listening to the doctor discuss the condition with Adrian, her heart aching with bitterness. What did it matter if her eyes recovered? She and Adrian could never go back to how they were. In this game filled with lies and deceit, she'd rather remain blind. For the remaining 5 days, all she asked was to leave Hong Kong smoothly, and then, with him, never to meet again, whether in life or death. The room fell silent for a few seconds before the man's calm voice emerged. No need, did Dr. Chen not tell you? For these past 5 years, I've only had him prescribe the most ordinary tonic for Madam. If she could see again, Sandy, how would she face herself? A crisp snap sounded. The diamond ring on her hand was Tiffany snapped in half, blood seeping from between her fingers. She practically stumbled back to her room, her entire body trembling violently without conscious control. In her panic, she knocked over the wedding photo on the table. In the photo, Adrian leaned slightly forward, placing a sacred and devout kiss on the girl's forehead. Plop, plop. Her tears fell to the ground without warning. Amidst her sobs, she began to laugh foolishly, her stomach convulsing as wave after wave of bitter fluid surged up. Ha ha ha, Adrian, you're absolutely despicable. It turned out that all those 1,000 dark days and nights of her confusion, fear, and timidity were meticulously orchestrated by Adrian. She cried until no tears were left. Then pulled the wedding photo from its frame and fed it into the shredder. As the paper was being shredded, countless sweet memories with Adrian in her mind seemed to gradually fade away. Honey, what are you doing? Tiffany poured the snow-white shreds into the trash bin, her voice hoarse. Nothing, just a messed up document. Adrian frowned at the shredded paper, finding it somewhat familiar. However, before he could ponder further, Sandy walked in holding a bouquet of flowers. His gaze was instantly drawn to Sandy. The flowers were thrust into Tiffany's arms. Ms. Tiffany, happy birthday. Tiffany coughed violently from the overpowering scent of the bouquet, tears streaming down her face. Sandy even covered her eyes and forcibly pushed her to the dining table. Ready, surprised Tilda. On the pristine marble table lay several pieces of bloody pork ribs and vegetables stir-fried to a charred black. It's almost comically ironic. Sandy slapped her forehead in frustration. Oh, I forgot Ms. Tiffany can't see. Before she could finish, she abruptly covered her mouth with a look of someone who'd said the wrong thing. Adrian immediately signed to comfort her. It's okay, Tiffany won't mind. Sandy lowered her head dejectedly and signed. Why do I always mess everything up? It's fine. I also made Ms. Tiffany a mango cake. Seeing this, Adrian's eyes nearly overflowed with tenderness as he urged, Sweetheart, hurry and eat the cake. Tiffany stood rooted to the spot. Clenching her fists, she suddenly felt utterly exhausted, her voice as dry as if scraped by coarse gravel. Adrian, today isn't my birthday, it's the anniversary of my dead child, and also, I'm allergic to mangoes. Adrian was taken aback, a hint of regret flashing in his eyes. Honey, She ignored his plea and turned to leave, returning to her room. She shut out both the woman's sobs and the man's comforting words behind the door. She didn't know how long she had slept before being awakened by a strange noise downstairs. Blinking my eyes open groggily, I saw a familiar figure. Adrian was sitting by her bedside with gentle eyes. Honey, you're awake. I made you some jujube paste and yam cakes. Would you like to get up and have some? Tiffany lightly avoided his touch. No, I'm not hungry. The man's hand froze mid-air as he let out a slight sigh. Honey, don't lie to me, you're still angry, aren't you? After we get through this busy period, how about I take you to a concert? Tiffany turned her face away, staring silently at her curled hair ends. Seeing this, the man pressed his lips together, his handsome brows slightly furrowed. He took Tiffany's hand. Darling, the little girl has prepared an animal performance to make amends to you. She frowned slightly, about to refuse. When Adrian unceremoniously carried her downstairs, the night of the first lunar month was bitterly cold. Tiffany, wearing only thin pajamas, had a face pale from the cold, but it was hidden by the thick darkness of the night. She shivered several times, watching as the man walked straight toward Sandy. Holding clothes in his arms, he helped her put on the thick protective suit, fastened her gloves and helmet, and finally pressed a tender kiss on Sandy's cheek. Sandy, don't overwork yourself. You and the baby are what matter most. The wind carried his gentle voice into Tiffany's ears like a hammer blow. Sandy, as the cage cover was lifted, Tiffany's pupils contracted sharply. Inside were a fully grown tiger and a black wolf. As if catching a scent, they were frantically ramming against the cage bars in frenzy. A woo, the black wolf howled at the sky, its tawny eyes fixed on her with savage intensity. Tiffany instinctively took a step back. Suddenly remembering that strangely pungent bouquet of flowers, suppressing her fear and unease, she said, Adrian, I'm not feeling well, I'd like to return to my room. In the past, whenever she mentioned feeling unwell, the man would immediately become extremely concerned and escort her back to her room without hesitation. But now, he could only frown helplessly. Tiffany, Don't be willful, she's been preparing for a long time. Tiffany's throat felt clogged with cotton. Her lips twisting bitterly, the performance began, with Sandy somewhat awkwardly directing the tiger and black wolf. The two ferocious beasts weaved through flaming hoops and balance beams. Everything appeared to be proceeding normally. Good, so good, Adrian kept clapping, his gaze fixed on Sandy with overflowing affection, completely oblivious that Tiffany couldn't even see this performance meant as her apology. But that wasn't even the worst part. Tiffany felt her panic growing stronger, her hands trembling more violently, for only she knew how the tiger and black wolf were turning to look at her with increasing frequency, and in their eyes burned a savage hunger. She retreated imperceptibly, one step, then another. She was nearly out of their striking range now. Then came a piercing scream. Ah! The figure on the command platform suddenly swayed. Sandy tumbled down, the chains in hand abruptly loosened. At the same moment, the tiger and black wolf suddenly began roaring wildly. Sandy, Adrian shouted uncontrollably, like an unsheathed sword, charging forward. The moment he left, Tiffany was completely exposed to the two beasts. The black wolf of the tiger suddenly halted its frenzied movements, baring its sharp fangs at her. Tiffany's pupils constricted violently, her breath choked off. Almost instantly, two enormous dark shadows lunged toward her. Pain, such unbearable pain, the excruciating agony of having her internal organs crushed. Ah! Tiffany let out a deathly scream from her throat. Before her eyes was a sea of crimson. In the blurred distance, a man held Sandy tightly in his arms. When she opened her eyes again, Tiffany found herself lying in the VIP ward of a hospital owned by the Aries family. The excruciating pain in her chest and legs forced a muffled groan from her lips. Don't move, the nurse pressed down on her shoulder. You're incredibly lucky to be alive. 3 broken ribs, liver hemorrhage. Last night the ER only had Dr. Black on duty, and another patient's family insisted he treat their pregnant wife first. Fortunately, she only had external abrasions and didn't delay Dr. Black from treating you. By the way, where are your family members? Tiffany felt as if her entire body had been repeatedly run over by a car, her voice dry and hoarse. I don't have any family. The nurse froze, her eyes instantly filling with pity. Sandy's voice came from outside the ward. Adrian. I'm sorry, I really don't know why they suddenly went out of control. It's my fault that Tiffany got hurt. Sandy, it's not your fault. You're injured too. The man kissed away her tears. You're carrying our baby. No crying aloud. Go back to your room and rest properly. Sandy sobbed even harder. I don't want to go back. I need to make it up to Tiffany. Hearing the word apology for the 3rd time, Tiffany could no longer contain herself and flung her cup to the ground. Outside, the noise abruptly ceased as Adrian hurried in. Honey, do you want some water? Let me pour it for you. Seeing his seemingly genuine concern, Tiffany suddenly felt utterly exhausted. Did you check? Why did they suddenly go berserk? Her voice was hoarse, her eyes flickering with the last glimmer of light. The tiger and the black wolf had clearly caught a scent, which was why they were so frenzied, and their target was her alone. Just an accident, Adrian replied without hesitation. Tucking her in, focus on recovering. Don't overthink it, okay? Tiffany's eyes completely lost their light. She stared at him for a long time, her heart aching in waves. 3 years ago, she had gone out alone to rescue a mother cat giving birth during a heavy rainstorm. Never did she expect to encounter a group of hoodlums who intended to harm her. Adrian arrived just in time to see the leader grabbing her arm and dragging her into the alley. His eyes suddenly burned with fury. Beat them up, leave just enough breath in them. Span. The screams in the alley lasted a full 3 hours, the blood nearly staining the ground red. Span. Tiffany had never seen him so enraged before. In the end, all those people were sent to prison, and the one who touched her had his arm broken and was tortured to death in prison. But now, she was nearly beaten to death, left covered in wounds, yet he didn't investigate at all, nor did he harbor the slightest suspicion. Sandy. Tiffany felt a deathly stillness in her heart as she calmly turned her face away. Understood, Adrian felt something was amiss, but before he could ponder further, the commotion from Sandy's hospital room reached his ears. He hurried to his feet. Honey, I'll go prepare some food for you. Wait for me. Tiffany lay silently without even glancing his way. Adrian left then, never to return. She was so hungry and tired that she fell into a deep sleep. Even in her dreams, she seemed to encounter something sorrowful, as her brows remained slightly furrowed. Tiffany was awakened by a sharp pain in her arm. She looked down to see a large, blood-stained bandage wrapped around it. I'm changing your dressing. You just had a skin graft surgery, the nurse said. Taking out a fresh bandage. What skin graft surgery? She gasped in shock. the patient in the next room, Mrs. Aries, scraped her arm, and Mr. Adrian had you graft a piece of skin for her. The nurse sighed. That's why they say fate treats people differently. Mrs. Aries gets a minor scratch and Mr. Adrian acts like it's the end of the world. Unlike folks like us, Tiffany turned deathly pale, her heart feeling as if half of it had been brutally carved out by a dagger. Her lips trembled as if she had swallowed a live ember, her eyes glistening with moist light. Could you please help me apply for a hospital transfer? What transfer? The man pushed the door open and strode in, carrying a pile of tonics and Tiffany's favorite snacks. He took off his coat, personally washed her hands and feet, then cleaned fruits to feed her. He even meticulously followed recipes, attempting over 10 times just to prepare the most nutritious and delicious meals for her. Darling, eat well and get better soon. He scooped up a spoonful of soup, carefully blowing on it to cool it down before bringing it to her lips, attentive, considerate, and gentle, just as always. Tiffany watched it all, yet her heart grew colder with each passing day, because she knew Adrian's love had long since changed. He would feed Sandy the most flavorful portion of every nutritious meal. He would press his ear against Sandy's belly again and again, his face full of anticipation. In a few more months, we'll feel the baby kick. He would wait until she fell asleep, then secretly meet Sandy in the hospital room, until both of them were covered in telltale marks. He would introduce to everyone, Sandy, this is my wife, she's pregnant, I hope everyone will take good care of her. Tiffany just watched all this quietly, neither crying nor making a scene. Those who truly want to leave are often so stingy that even saying goodbye feels like a waste of time. The bitter winter howled, the wind whirling up one fallen leaf after another. She only occasionally took the opportunity when Adrian and Sandy were together to call the agent handling the emigration procedures, inquiring about the progress. On the day of her discharge, the agent finally sent her a message through someone. MS. Tiffany, your procedures are expected to be completed the morning after tomorrow. Tiffany finally let out a sigh of relief, her face breaking into a smile of unburdened joy. Adrian paused as he held Sandy's hand, but his gaze lingered on Tiffany. Her smile was just as beautiful as it had been 5 years ago, as if nothing had changed, but upon closer inspection, one could notice a trace of sorrow between her brows. An inexplicable feeling stirred in his heart, and instinctively, he pulled Tiffany into his arms. Darling, cheer up, I'll always be here for you. Tiffany subtly avoided his touch and smiled faintly. I'm fine. Adrian suppressed the unease in his heart and planted a kiss on her forehead. All right, I'll take you home. On the drive home, Adrian kept his gaze fixed on Tiffany. Just as he was about to hold her hand, Sandy let out a scream. Watch out. Bang, a violent collision. A black business van flipped them over instantly. Tiffany had a very long dream. She returned to 5 years ago, when she first met Adrian. Back then, she hadn't yet lost her sight. And her favorite thing was going on outdoor adventures. She came across him after he had fallen down a desolate mountain, breaking a leg and running a high fever. Barely clinging to life, she used up all her reserves of food, water, and medicine to save his life. Adrian remained unconscious for 3 days before waking up, by which time Tiffany had already collapsed from exhaustion. It was he who slit his own wrist and fed her his blood 10 times to keep her alive until the rescue team arrived. Adrian, when pursuing her, he said their survival in the wilderness must have been fate from a past life, a match made in heaven, a bond forged through life and death. But in a sudden turn, the scene shifts to Adrian abandoning Sandy to wild beasts to save himself. Tiffany let out a scream and opened her eyes. Her hands and feet were tied, and a black cloth covered her eyes, leaving her unable to see anything. She could only faintly hear someone speaking. Mr. Adrian, your Ari's family seized our land and drove my family to bankruptcy. Shouldn't you pay the price? Bart, you dare to kidnap me. You're asking for death. It was Adrian's voice. Bart laughed maniacally, his tone deranged. Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me, but simply killing you would be letting you off too easy. He stared at Tiffany for a moment before suddenly curling his lips into a cruel grin, saying cheerfully, how about we play a little game? Adrian clenched his fists, a vicious glint overflowing in his eyes. I have 3 small punishments here, Mr. Adrian personally chooses who to save. With a wave of his hand, Tiffany and Sandy were forcibly dragged to Bart's side. Woo-woo. Sandy struggled in fear. Tiffany clenched her teeth, enduring the stinging pain of gravel scraping her back. Adrian witnessed the scene, veins bulging on his forehead. Let them go. This is between you and me. There's no need to involve others. Bart turned a deaf ear. First punishment, seawater reversal. Adrian held his breath. I'll give you whatever you want. Just release them. Enough talk. Bart snarled with a vicious glare. Since you won't choose, I'll throw them both into the sea for shark food. No sooner had the words been spoken than Tiffany and Sandy were kicked into the icy seawater. No, Adrian roared in fury. In an instant, the briny sting of seawater flooded Tiffany's nose and mouth, suffocation closing around her like a vice. She struggled underwater, her lungs feeling as if they were being torn apart. Again and again she was thrown in and pulled out, 3 times in succession. Tiffany was already on the verge of death. As Bart signaled his men to throw them into the water for the 4th time, Adrian, eyes bloodshot, voice hoarse, shouted, "Bart, stop. I choose. Oh, Mr. Adrian, who are you going to save, Tiffany or Sandy?" Adrian's gaze wavered between Tiffany and Sandy for a long time before finally settling on Tiffany. "I choose." Sandy let out a pained whimper as the cloth gag fell from her mouth, bursting into heart-wrenching sobs. "Adrian, save me, save our child." In an instant, Adrian's words caught in his throat as he closed his eyes. After a long pause, he rasped, "Sandy." Suddenly, Tiffany's strength drained from her entire body. Bart laughed maniacally. "Good, Mr. Adrian has quite the spirit." He personally grabbed Tiffany by the hair and threw her into the icy seawater. 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, until the 10th time. Adrian could no longer bear to watch, his eyes burning red. "Are you trying to torture her to death? Wasn't this your own choice?" Bart sneered, watching with amusement as Adrian's expression darkened. The second punishment, 99 lashes. "Mr. Adrian, choose, who will you save this time?" Adrian clenched his fists until blood dripped, his chest heaving violently. Tiffany continued to cough as if her heart would tear apart, seawater seeping into her organs, every cell screaming in agony. She was thrown to the ground, her breath faint. Clearly, she couldn't hold on any longer. Yet the next second, Adrian's reply plunged her completely into the abyss. Sandy, beside her, Sandy wept with joy, biting her lips as she timidly glanced at Tiffany. "Sister, you've suffered so much." Tiffany paid no heed, only staring in disbelief toward Adrian's direction, her heart nearly numb with pain. The whip struck her body instantly, drawing a muffled groan as cold sweat broke out. The excruciating pain made her 10 slender, onion-like fingers claw desperately at the rough ground, leaving 10 shocking trails of blood on the gravel. 1, 2, 3, 55. Tiffany's back was soaked with large patches of blood, and she nearly passed out. Adrian watched this scene unfold, his heart nearly torn apart. "Stop it, I said stop," he roared in despair, breaking free from restraint to throw himself over Tiffany. Sandy suddenly let out a piercing scream, clutching her stomach with a deathly pale face. "Help me, I think I'm having a miscarriage." Adrian froze mid-motion, instinctively tightening his grip on her hands. "What's wrong?" In that moment of his hesitation, another brutal whip strike landed. Tiffany spurted a mouthful of blood with a phut sound. The man's pupils constricted sharply. "Tiffany." Bart watched this absurd scene unfold, laughing heartily. "Mr. Adrian, I happen to have a medical team here. But you can still only choose to save one person. This time, will you still choose Sandy?" The whip fell upon her body again and again. Tiffany could hear nothing but a sharp ringing in her ears. Unable to make out Adrian's response, she struggled to keep her eyes open, only seeing Adrian and Bart appear to exchange some words. Bart nodded in agreement, then he gathered Sandy into his arms and hurriedly turned to leave. He strode in the opposite direction with the woman in his arms, not even glancing back at her. "Ha ha ha." She felt all the blood in her body turn ice cold, her laughter desperate and broken. The 99 lashes on her body could never compare to the heart-wrenching agony within. The setting sun bled across the horizon as seagulls alighted upon her, their snow-white feathers instantly stained crimson. "Adrian, your so-called divine matches and life-and-death friendships are merely this," she struggled, clinging to her last breath. The world before her eyes gradually blurred. "Adrian, if there's a next life, I never want to love you again." After what felt like an eternity, the piercing wail of police sirens tore through the sky. Tiffany was rescued. After receiving basic treatment for her wounds at the hospital, she declined the recommendation for hospitalization and returned alone to the empty castle. This was the place Adrian had personally designed and supervised construction for, just to bring a smile to her face. Sandy had only been here for 2 short months, yet her presence was already imprinted everywhere. The walk-in closet and music room that originally belonged to Tiffany were now crammed with random clutter. Even the wooden sculpture she had painstakingly carved for Adrian now lay tossed haphazardly on the floor. Back then, with red-rimmed eyes, he had clearly vowed to cherish it for a lifetime. Tiffany looked at the pitch-black sky outside and let out a bleak laugh. A full day and night had passed. Adrian still remained by Sandy's side. She smiled indifferently, wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth, and placed 3 items into the mailbox in front of the castle. The first was Sandy's test report on the scented powder from the bouquet he gave her yesterday. Once opened, he would realize that the frenzy of the tiger and the black wolf that night was no accident, but a deliberate act. The bouquet contained an overwhelming amount of madness-inducing spices. The second item was her recent medical report from the hospital, showing she had suffered a miscarriage. At the moment he chose to save Sandy, as he watched helplessly while she was swallowed by the icy sea. When he endured 99 lashes to protect Sandy, this was the second time he had indirectly caused the death of their child, for Sandy's sake. The third, it was that broken diamond ring. That was Adrian's engagement ring, personally selected and polished in Africa 5 years ago when he proposed. It took a full 6 months. Polished 13 million times, such pure, steadfast love had caused a sensation throughout Hong Kong that year. The one who cherished her dearly, placing her at the pinnacle of his heart, was him. The one who pledged eternal vows at the wedding, swearing to love Tiffany for all eternity, was him. Yet the one who, to protect Sandy, deliberately delayed treating her eyes, was him. The one who, for Sandy's so-called atonement beast show, plunged her into irreversible danger, was him. It was also him who watched helplessly as she endured 10 drownings and 99 lashes. Turns out this fiery love had long been extinguished into mere embers during Hong Kong's consecutive rainy seasons. For these 5 years, no matter how angry they got, Tiffany never once took it off. Now, Adrian, it's time to return it to you. The roar of a helicopter descended from the sky. Tiffany squinted upward, where a familiar face was propped on a hand, watching her, not leaving. Tiffany. She stood there for a moment, then suddenly smiled and asked him, "Got a lighter, Nick?" Nick let out a whistle and tossed down a box of matches. "Only got this." Tiffany nodded. "It's enough." She endured the pain in her body and walked step by step toward the castle. Their love had sprouted here, but in deception and betrayal repeated time and again, it withered and vanished with startling speed. She struck the match in her hand and threw it inside, with a boom. Flames instantly engulfed the entire castle. The once warm and cozy home now resembled a living, man-eating hellish prison. "Farewell," Tiffany murmured, then turned away without hesitation and boarded the helicopter. The helicopter's engine roared as the hem of her clothes fluttered violently in the darkness, carrying her across the ocean. Meanwhile, Adrian learned that Tiffany had been rescued and was driving back frantically. On the ground and in the air, 2 completely opposite straight lines that would never intersect. On the Jianghai Bridge, a Maybach S680 sped past. Adrian pursed his lips tightly, sweat trickling down his straight-nosed bridge. Tick, tock, faster, even faster. He needed to see Tiffany immediately to confirm her safety. 10 hours ago, by the seaside, Adrian drained nearly all the cash flow from Ari's family before finally making Bart relent. Bart's whip was stained with blood. Seeing Adrian's trembling pupils, he snorted contemptuously. "So, even the proud and ruthless Crown Prince of Harbour City would lower his head for love? You promised me, get the medical team to treat Tiffany immediately." Adrian clenched his fists, his eyes bloodshot. "Fine," Bart said, "I always keep my word. She can stay here as collateral until the Ari's family transfers the money. Take me as hostage instead. Let her go." Adrian cut in coldly. Bart was momentarily stunned, then burst into hearty laughter. "Great, having Mr. Adrian personally as a hostage is more than I could ask for." But the next second, his expression darkened abruptly as he pointed at Sandy. "But she stays. I just heard this woman is carrying your child." Adrian's eyes turned cold. "Fine." He picked up Sandy and was locked in a pitch-black warehouse by Bart's men. In the darkness, the man's sword-like eyebrows were tightly knit. Tiffany's bloodless face kept flashing through his mind. He sat motionless by the warehouse door, like a statue. Sandy bit her lip. "Adrian, why did you agree to Bart's terms, a full 50 billion? Adrian did not answer, merely gazing quietly at the sliver of light seeping through the door crack. From that faint glow, he traced the outline of a blurred figure. Later, as the sky gradually darkened, even that sliver of light vanished completely, yet the man remained seated there, unmoving, after what felt like an eternity. The piercing wail of sirens broke the silence. He and Sandy were rescued, only to learn that Bart had never sent medical teams to treat Tiffany. He urgently asked the SWAT team if they'd seen Tiffany, but was only told she had left alone long ago. Adrian was beside himself with anxiety. Tiffany was still injured, and the only place she could go was the castle. With this thought, he stomped on the accelerator, sending the speedometer soaring to 240, at breakneck speed. Adrian soon caught sight of the castle's silhouette. A pleased smirk curled at the corners of his mouth, but the next second, that smile froze completely on his face, because within the castle, Flames filled the sky, illuminating the heavens above as bright as day. Remembering the resolute look in Tiffany's eyes before he left, as if she were ready to abandon the entire world, a dreadful thought began to slowly emerge in Adrian's mind. His hands started trembling uncontrollably. No. Absolutely impossible. The next second, a wild deer suddenly appeared on the winding mountain road ahead. Adrian's pupils constricted abruptly. The car was moving too fast. Braking was no longer possible. Gritting his teeth, he yanked the steering wheel hard to the left, barely avoiding collision. Yet now the vehicle had completely veered off the mountain road. Adrian wanted to grab his phone to call for help, but the unexpected arrived first. The car slid down in an instant, plummeting into the cliff. Meanwhile, aboard the helicopter, Tiffany leaned quietly against the cabin wall, her serene profile visible. "Are you okay?" Nick turned around, only to have his eyes stung by her paper-white complexion. Ahem. Tiffany suppressed the pain surging through her body and forced a smile. "I'm fine." He furrowed his brows, carefully observing her movements. She slightly curled her abdomen, her hands trembling involuntarily. The helicopter dodged an air current. Tiffany swayed with the fuselage, pulling at the wound on her back. She clenched her teeth, a fine layer of cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. Nick sensed something keenly. "Are you hurt?" Tiffany wanted to shake her head, but darkness suddenly engulfed her vision. Nick watched helplessly as her body, like a tattered and wind-worn doll, slowly slid from the chair. His pupils contracted sharply as he rushed forward in 3 quick strides, catching her firmly in his arms. "Tiffany, wake up." His hand felt warm and wet. Nick, and when he looked down, it was covered in bright red blood. His expression darkened instantly as he pressed the intercom button in the cockpit. "Find the nearest hospital and land immediately." Inside the military hospital at the peacekeeping forces base, Nick stood by the window, watching one wounded patient after another being carried into the emergency room. Among them were those with bullet wounds through their eyes, those with severed limbs, and others injured by bomb blasts. Blood dripped steadily from the stretchers, while every doctor and nurse wore expressions of solemn numbness. Behind him, the emergency room light went out, and the doctor removed his mask. "Doctor, how is she?" The white-bearded old man sighed and shook his head. "Not good. Acute lung injury, pulmonary edema, rib fractures, ruptured internal organs, and post-abortion complications." Every word, every phrase, hit Nick's nerves like a sledgehammer. He clenched his fists, a storm brewing in his eyes, and called out to the shadow behind him. "Wade, Master, I'm here." Wade appeared behind Nick, his face utterly ordinary, the kind that would instantly vanish in a crowd. Yet no one would ever guess his hidden identity as the most capable right-hand man of the Italian mafia boss. "Find out why this happened." Wade gave a slight bow. "Yes, Master, that winter 5 years ago was Nick's darkest time." Tiffany knocked on his door on a day when snowflakes were swirling in the air. Her eyes sparkled, a radiant smile gracing her face. "Nick." The man looked up from his desk, removing his gold-rimmed glasses. "When? You seem happy." Tiffany pursed her lips. "Nick, I'm going back to China." Nick's fingers paused in his coat pocket, the facets of the diamond ring digging painfully into his skin. "Why, hadn't you decided to stay in England to pursue ballet?" The girl's eyelashes fluttered slightly. "Tiffany, did something happen? Tell me, I can help you." Tiffany shook her head, pausing for a moment before saying, I have someone I like." Nick felt a sharp pang in his heart, the light in his eyes dimming considerably. "Who is he?" The question swirled 4 or 5 times in her heart, yet she never dared to voice it. Later, she gave up her promising career in Northern Europe, abandoned the chance to become an international ballet dancer, and chose to return home to marry Adrian. Nick could only swallow his words again and again, carefully hiding that unrequited love away. He no longer dared to follow any news about her, let alone return to the country. It wasn't that he hadn't sneaked a glance, but every time he witnessed their unwavering love, it felt like a slow, torturous death to him. That man adored her to the core, his eyes filled with nothing but her, unwilling to let her suffer even the slightest grievance. And in the same way, Nick, the girl he deeply loved, had eyes only for that man. He was consumed by wild jealousy, yet almost masochistically suppressed his inner emotions, mocking his own incompetence again and again. In the end, Tiffany and Harbor City became a place of sorrow he couldn't bear to touch. But why, in the end, was she left covered in wounds? Thinking of her resolute gaze when she left Harbor City today, Nick flashed a sinister look in his eyes. Whoever hurt her must pay the price. Port City. Adrian had been unconscious for 3 days and nights. Finally, his finger twitched. Sandy sobbed softly, then suddenly stopped, her eyes flashing with delight. "Doctor, doctor." His finger moved. The man on the hospital bed seemed to be awakened by the noise. frowning slightly as he lifted his eyelids. Sandy saw Adrian's eyes open and threw herself onto him uncontrollably. "Adrian, you're finally awake. Do you have any idea how worried I've been?" She sobbed incessantly. "The doctor said if you didn't wake up today, you might never wake up again." Adrian's head throbbed dully, irritated by her noise. He pushed the woman away from his embrace with visible impatience. "Who are you?" Sandy's crying came to an abrupt halt, her tear-wiping motion froze as if paused. Teardrops clinging to her lashes as she stared at Adrian in shock. "Adrian, why you don't recognize me? I'm Sandy." The man's brows furrowed deeper. "Where's my wife Tiffany?" He disliked all women who resembled Tiffany, loathed them, even though the woman before him bore a 70 to 80% resemblance to Tiffany. Adrian could tell at a glance that she wasn't Tiffany. Tiffany had softer, gentler features, and when she lowered her lashes, there was a natural divinity of compassion about her. At the mere thought of her, Adrian's gaze softened. He had prepared everything to propose to her at her birthday banquet 3 days later. Especially that diamond ring. Adrian reached into his pocket, but his expression suddenly darkened. Frowning deeply, he demanded of Sandy, "Hey, where's my diamond ring? Have you seen the ring I was going to give to Tiffany?" "Diamond ring? What diamond ring? Wasn't that diamond ring given to Tiffany 5 years ago?" Meeting his completely unfamiliar and indifferent gaze, Sandy's blood seemed to freeze. She stood nailed to the spot as if struck by a hammer, her eyes blank with confusion. "Adrian, what are you talking about?" Adrian flashed a trace of impatience in his eyes. He had promised Tiffany a perfect wedding, that ring was her favorite style, and he'd poured his heart into it. If the ring got lost, she would surely be heartbroken. Last time, to celebrate her birthday, he rushed back early from France, and she waited for him with overflowing joy. Little did she expect the flight would be delayed, leaving her waiting for him for a full day and night. When he finally saw her, the poor girl's eyes were swollen like walnuts. From then on, Adrian never dared to break any promise he made to her again. The thought made the woman before him seem all the more irritating. This woman looked so much like Tiffany. And now she's inexplicably appeared here. He'd carelessly lost the ring again. That would surely upset and anger the young girl. "I don't care who you are, get out now, immediately, right away. Don't let me see you again." Adrian, his eyes were as cold as ice, filled with undisguised disgust. Sandy only then did she realize he had lost his memory. Breaking free from her immense shock, she was immediately plunged into the abyss of panic. "Adrian remembers Tiffany, but not her. How can this be, Adrian? Don't you remember? It's me, Sandy. I'm the one you loved most." Sandy's eyes reddened slightly from agitation as she clutched Adrian's sleeve desperately, her fingertips turning white. He forgot her. How could he forget her? Then what do her 5 years of meticulous planning and scheming amount to? This way, if she wanted to use the child to claim a share of the Aries family's assets, they would definitely need to verify the child's bloodline. But this child isn't Adrian's at all. Sandy suddenly panicked, clutching Adrian's arm tightly, trying to make him remember quickly. The next second, she was violently thrown aside by a tremendous force, crashing heavily to the ground. "Get away!" The man avoided her as if she were a plague. The ward door clicked softly. Adrian's expression flashed with panic. He practically scrambled to remove the coat that Sandy had touched, instinctively explaining, "Tiffany, she threw herself at me. I don't even know her." However, upon realizing the visitor was Chassel, he froze momentarily before urgently asking, "Chassel, you came at the perfect time. Where's Tiffany?" Chassel had just learned from the doctor that Adrian's head trauma from the car accident left his memories frozen 5 years in the past. It was the year when he and Tiffany were most deeply in love. Back then, she hadn't gone blind. Sandy hadn't appeared yet. Chassel heard Adrian's question, and the image of that charred, ruined castle flashed through his mind. He turned his face away somewhat unnaturally, his lips trembling slightly as he suppressed his emotions. Tiffany and Adrian, no one knew better than him how deeply in love they were back then. But how could he bring himself to say it? 5 years had passed, and Tiffany was already. Tiffany, she said she wanted to go to Northern Europe for a few days and won't be back for a while. Adrian furrowed his brows tightly upon hearing this. "You're lying. Our engagement is in a few days. Why would she go to Northern Europe?" Ignoring the steel plate still supporting his legs, he struggled to get out of bed. "If you won't tell me, I'll find her myself." His wounds, not yet fully healed, began to bleed from the strain. The man seemed oblivious to the pain, gritting his teeth as he continued his movements. "Adrian, what are you doing? You're still injured." Sandy stepped forward to stop him, only to be violently shoved to the ground by Adrian. "Get away from me." No sooner had the words left his mouth than he himself crashed heavily to the ground from the momentum. The excruciating pain caused his coldly handsome face to momentarily stiffen and freeze. beads of sweat the size of peas rolling down in torrents. Chassel quickly crouched down to help him, but a gleaming object fell from his pocket. Adrian froze mid-motion. It was a broken diamond ring, speckled with tiny drops of blood, exactly the one he had intended to give to Tiffany. In an instant, his heart ached as if being torn apart, his head throbbing with unbearable pain. Countless fleeting yet indistinct images shattered within his mind. A familiar voice seemed to scream and weep in agony, clutching his exploding head in torment. The veins on his neck bulged violently. It's Tiffany. It's Tiffany's voice. Why is she crying? Why is she screaming in agony? With trembling hands, he picked up the broken diamond ring and rubbed the bloodstains on it with his sleeve, but the blood had dried firmly onto it, impossible to wipe away no matter how hard he tried. Adrian let out a heavy breath, gripping Chassel's wrist so tightly it nearly crushed the bones. His eyes burned crimson. Whose blood is this? Where is Tiffany? Chassel, tell me. Or don't blame me for forgetting our past ties, he roared with savage fury, as if his reverse scale had been struck. Chassel's eyes reddened with emotion. He slowly closed them, forcing a bitter smile. You insist on seeing her, is that it? Of course I'm sure. Say one more word and see what happens. Chassel stared at him for several seconds, took a deep breath, and said, Fine, I'll take you there. Peacekeeping hospital. Nick stayed close by Tiffany's side. Flipping through the investigation results Wade had delivered, his long eyelashes cast shadows over his chiseled Eurasian features, sharp as if carved by an axe. The atmosphere in the hospital room grew colder. Wade's head bowed even lower. After a long silence, Nick finally looked up from the thick stack of documents. His ice-blue eyes held the bitter chill of winter, brewing a terrifying storm. So, Tiffany had a car accident shortly after returning to the country and was trapped in that castle for 5 years. Yet all I heard was that she was perfectly fine. Wade's knees buckled violently as he dropped to the ground beside his feet. Master, please calm your anger. This subordinate deserves death. Was it my stepmother? The kneeling figure stiffened slightly before nodding. Yes, the First Madam deliberately suppressed news of MS, Tiffany. And with Adrian's control and manipulation of the media, it actually, Nick's lips curled into a frosty smile as he laughed in extreme fury. Good, excellent. The person on the hospital bed let out a muffled groan and slowly opened their eyes. The coldness in the man's eyes faded as he stood up and grasped her fingers. Tiffany, you're awake. How do you feel? Tiffany blinked drowsily before gradually regaining clarity in her gaze. She had been unconscious for an entire week. Dreaming of many past events, sweet, bewildered, painful, struggling, despairing. Yet in the end, what she dreamed of was a magnificent, solemnly beautiful ballet stage. That was the place she had yearned for day and night 5 years ago. For this, she practiced diligently, falling countless times and standing up again, pushing her body's limits over and over. Finally, at the age of 21, she received an invitation from the Royal Ballet School in London, yet fate played a cruel joke on her. Her grandmother was diagnosed with cancer. The doctor said that even with the best medication, she could only hold on for a year at most. Not only would this year be extremely costly, but it would also require a loved one to stay by her side. She was an orphan, adopted by her grandmother, who doted on her, loved her, and protected her, spending all her savings to send her to school and dance lessons. Tiffany rushed back to the country as soon as she heard the news, day and night without rest. Covered in dust and exhaustion, yet in just over half a year since they last met, that plump little old woman had withered to skin and bones. The moment she saw Tiffany, Grandma's eyes widened. Good heavens, Tiffany, you're back. Grandma, how are you? She rushed forward and embraced her grandmother. Grandma patted her thigh, trying to push her away with all her might. Grandma's fine. Hurry back to your dancing. This isn't a place for you. Tiffany clung tightly to her waist. Tears welling up in her eyes. I won't dance anymore. Grandma, no more, my dear. You mustn't stop dancing. You've loved it since you were little. Never complained no matter how hard it got. It's all my fault. All my fault. Grandma's condition worsened day by day. The periods of unconsciousness gradually overtaking her waking hours. Her hand was as withered as sun-dried old wood. Tiffany, Grandma's final wish was for you to find someone who loves and cherishes you. Not long after that, Grandma passed away. Tiffany met Adrian. The two developed feelings during that life-and-death hiking trip, and she followed Grandma's last wish by staying in Harbour City to marry Adrian. With this, she personally drew a period at the end of her dance career. The girl who once shone so brilliantly was now trapped in a sunless castle, suffering and struggling in the darkness. She longed for Adrian's love like parched land yearning for sweet rain, seeing him as the only light in her life. But in the end, that kind of passionate love ultimately ended in nothing but decay and ruin. Fortunately for her, It wasn't too late to turn back now. This time, she would stand on stage again and reclaim everything that rightfully belonged to her. Nick, I want to keep dancing. What's wrong with knocking twice for the place you want to go? Seeing the starlight reflected in her eyes, Nick was momentarily stunned. He nodded gently. All right, let's dance. Once you've recovered, we'll dance again. And I'll accompany you. Tiffany smiled through her tears and extended a hand to Nick. All right, it's my honor to have the piano maestro Nick as my accompanist. The man chuckled softly, gently clasping her fingertips. He and Tiffany had always been the most harmonious partners. Harbor City, you mean? It's 5 years later now. Adrian's astonished voice came from the back seat as he frowned at the unfamiliar scenery outside the window. Does that mean I'm already married to Tiffany? Then we must already have children. Chassel, I'm a father now, right? His heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and overwhelming joy splashed across his features like vibrant ink, coloring the corners of his eyes and brows with elation. Chassel silently turned the steering wheel, his lips parting without a sound. Then he heard the anxious question from the back seat. What's with the blood on the diamond ring? What happened to Tiffany? The car was engulfed in dead silence, broken only by Adrian's ragged breathing. Chassel, say something. What's wrong? Did I do something to upset Tiffany? Just tell me so I can apologize to her. Chassel slammed on the brakes, stopping beside a vast expanse of charred ruins. We're here. He pushed open the car door and practically fled outside, standing at a distance while chain-smoking desperately. The smoke blurred Chassel's face, allowing him to secretly let his eyes redden. 5 years ago, he met Tiffany through Adrian and was deeply drawn to this radiant, vivacious girl. The three became inseparable friends who shared everything. Later, when they married, Chassel sincerely blessed them before leaving for a foreign country to take over his family's overseas business. But he never expected that upon his return, everything would change. Adrian watched Chassel's lonely and despondent figure with an inexplicable surge of panic in his heart. He slowly turned his head to look at the scorched black ground. Chassel, what is this place? He heard his own voice, parched to the point of breaking. This is your home with Tiffany. Adrian's pupils trembled slightly. What? His eyes nearly burst as he stared at the ruins. Then where's Tiffany? Where is she? Chassel let out a heavy breath, voice shaking as he said, the police said, the fire was too intense. She didn't make it out. Shut up, Adrian roared furiously. I don't believe it. You're lying, you're lying. He frantically flung open the car door, tumbling and scrambling out from the back seat before crashing heavily onto the gravel-strewn ground. Crawling on all fours, he made his way toward the stretch of ruins. Tiffany can't be dead. They must have made a mistake. How could my Tiffany die? Beads of sweat the size of peas streamed incessantly from his hair. Adrian muttered mechanically, digging through chunks of charred debris with his hands. Tiffany, where are you? The acrid smell of burning stung his eyes, while a bone-chilling cold permeated every limb. I'm late. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sharp stones and concrete quickly wore his fingers raw, yet he seemed numb to the pain, mechanically repeating the same motions. Chassel tried to stop him but was shoved away violently. Get out. Adrian's eyes burned crimson. Have you all gone mad? Why aren't you helping? She must still be alive. He frantically dug through the collapsed ruins with even greater desperation, his hands bleeding profusely, the wounds so deep the bones were visible. Enough. Chassel let out a furious roar and delivered a heavy punch straight to Adrian's face. His voice choked with sobs as he roared, Adrian, do you really think this fire was an accident? She committed suicide. Faced with those vicious, raging flames, she didn't even struggle. She had long stopped wanting to live. The man who had been furious just a second ago froze in place, lifting his head in stunned silence, his eyes brimming with despair and shock. What did you say? He clutched Chassel's collar tightly, demanding, how could she possibly commit suicide? Someone as proud and radiant as her, how could she do such a thing? Chassel let out a mocking laugh, his gaze dripping with scorn. Indeed, why would she do something like that? Adrian, the one who truly drove her to her death, was you. Chassel's words struck like thunder, nailing him to the spot. Adrian took an involuntary step back, reflexively denying, impossible, that can't be, you broke her heart. How dare you forget all the pain she endured and now put on this show of deep affection? Adrian, she's dead right here in this castle where you deceived and imprisoned her for 5 years. You've wronged her your entire life. Chassel spat out the words fiercely before turning to leave. The midday sun blazed mercilessly. Adrian suddenly felt dizzy. In an instant, countless voices erupted in his ears. Tiffany, don't cry. From now on, I'll be your eyes. Marry me, will you? I'll love you for the rest of my life. I am willing to walk into the hall of marriage with Tiffany, to support and rely on each other through sickness and health, poverty and wealth, forever and always. Hearing these words, Adrian's expression gradually softened. It turns out that the future version of myself is also loving Tiffany well, yet the voice that next appeared in his mind shattered his joy mercilessly. Tiffany, I'm working overtime tonight. I made your favorite jujube paste and yam cakes, they're in the fridge. Be careful when you go get them. I'm in a meeting right now. Can I call you back later, baby? I've been really busy lately. I'll take you to the concert after I finish my work, Tiffany. I really didn't mean to forget your birthday. There have been so many issues at the company recently. Layer upon layer of voices nearly burst Adrian's head apart. He exhaled shakily, his eyes filled with hatred. Future Adrian, what the hell are you doing? How could such a large company need its CEO to work overtime? And how could you possibly forget her birthday? He raised his hand and slapped himself hard across the face. Yet the noise didn't stop. Instead, it grew increasingly chaotic. This time, there was even an unfamiliar woman's voice added to the mix. Adrian, the baby keeps kicking me. He says he wants to hear a story from Daddy. Where are you going, Tiffany? There's an emergency at the office. I'm sorry, Tiffany. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have left you alone on the mountain. Don't cry. Don't cry. We'll have another child. Her eyes. No need to cure them. Tiffany, this is the nutritionist I found for you. Eat quickly. Stop fooling around. She worked hard on this. 99 lashes. Who will you choose to protect? Adrian, I think I'm having a miscarriage. I choose Sandy. A thunderous boom exploded in his mind. Even without remembering what happened, he could piece together a rough outline from these scattered words. That woman's voice belonged to the person he had just seen in the hospital room. So, over these 5 years, he had fallen in love with a woman who looked 80% like Tiffany. And even had a child with her. He had even deceived and hurt Tiffany repeatedly, all for her sake. Adrian, a metallic sweetness rose in his throat as he spat a mouthful of blood onto the scorched ruins. Charcoal mixed with blood stung his eyes. Ha ha ha, Adrian, how could you hurt her like this? With a thud, he collapsed to his knees, his once straight and unyielding spine now bent beyond recognition. The sun moved from its zenith to the western horizon. And in that vast expanse of scorched ruins, a tottering figure kept digging through the charred debris with bare hands. Tiffany, I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. Please come back. Only when night fell did Adrian finally collapse to the ground, utterly exhausted. Regret and agony engulfed him like towering waves as he repeatedly smashed his head against the hard, rough ground until blood streamed down his face. Tiny snowflakes landed on his eyelashes one by one, melting the dried blood on his face, until they turned into bloody water that drenched his entire body. He reached out his hand and caught a single intact snowflake. In that fleeting moment, the sound of a man's broken sobs echoed through the lifeless ruins. In the winter of the harbor city, snow rarely fell. Yet Tiffany adored snowfall, especially the vast, all-encompassing snow like that in northern Europe. He had promised countless times to take her to see it after they married. Yet, in the end, she lost her sight, and he fell in love with someone else. That snow never did fall upon their shoulders. Adrian lay quietly curled up on the ground, clutching the broken diamond ring tightly in his hand. Tiffany, did it hurt? You were always so afraid of pain. When the fire reached you, did it hurt terribly? It's snowing. Tiffany dashed out from the house, stretching out her hand to catch a snowflake. Wow, so beautiful. The snowflake landed on her eyelashes, transforming her into an adorable and lively little sprite. Nick followed behind, holding her coat in his hands. Tiffany, put on your clothes. You've only just recovered. Her injuries had mostly healed. Aside from some lingering weakness, nearly all other discomforting symptoms had disappeared. Nick had sought out Italy's most authoritative and rigorous doctors to examine her in rotation. After repeated confirmations, he was finally reassured. Tiffany's vision had returned, but prolonged blindness had caused some neurological damage. She couldn't use her eyes for extended periods or experience strong emotional fluctuations. Upon hearing this news, she let out a long sigh of relief. It's truly a blessing in disguise. Tiffany, there's another good news to tell you. Nick's gaze gently rested on her, his deep blue eyes brimming with tender warmth. The doctor said you can try rehabilitation dance training tomorrow. Really? Tiffany immediately stood up, grabbing the man's forearm with a look of delighted surprise. Nick, you really weren't lying to me. Nick nodded, only to suddenly feel a soft weight collapse into his arms. The girl had already thrown herself into his embrace in excitement. This is wonderful. Nick, thank you. The moment he realized the person in his arms was the girl he'd been yearning for over 5 years. Nick was instantly enveloped by overwhelming joy. The man's entire body stiffened like an iron plate as he cautiously reached out and gently placed his hand on Tiffany's back. Congratulations, Tiffany. The girl's shoulder blades were thin and light, now trembling slightly with happiness. Nick patted her gently as if handling a precious treasure. "Tiffany, may you from now on be radiant, uplifted, and dance only for yourself." Harbor City. The emergency room lights burned through the night. Chassel sat on the hallway bench, staring blankly at the three blood-red characters above. In resuscitation, Adrian attempted suicide by charcoal burning, his life hanging by a thread. When he truly realized what had happened, he discovered how absurd and ridiculous this world really was. In just a short week, he had nearly lost two of his closest friends. With a bang, the light suddenly went out. Chassel snapped back to reality and wiped his face. "Doctor, how is he?" The doctor sighed softly. "We managed to resuscitate him, but the patient has lost the will to live. There's nothing more we can do. The brain damage from the car accident hasn't healed yet, and now he's suffered another severe blow. Whether he wakes up or not depends on his own will." The doctor's words struck like a sledgehammer, pinning Chassel rigidly in place. In the hospital room, Adrian wore a ventilator, his chest rising and falling faintly. He was still clutching something in his hand. Chassel prized his fingers open, the note wrapped around the broken diamond ring. It read, "After my death, please cremate my remains and scatter them here." Chassel stared blankly at those lines of text. He knew Adrian was deeply in love with Tiffany, but never imagined he would lose the will to live after Tiffany's death. "Adrian, if you still have a conscience, you should wake up now, live properly and repent for your sins, instead of dying like this." The man lying on the bed remained still, showing no response. His face was so pale it seemed almost transparent, as if he might vanish at any moment. Chassel heaved a deep sigh before being called away by the doctor. After he left, a familiar figure entered the ward. It was Sandy. Frowning, she first scrutinized Adrian lying on the bed, then let out a sigh laced with disdain and frustration. "Hey, bro, I don't think he's waking up. We need to come up with another plan." She put the phone on speaker and placed it on the nightstand, freeing both hands to rummage through Adrian's body for something. "Still need to think of a way. Just say you're Tiffany and transfer the rest of his assets away. Isn't that simple?" Sandy rolled her eyes. "Are you really this dumb or just pretending? Do you think they'll just take my word for it? Every procedure requires facial and fingerprint verification. You've been Tiffany for so long, who would suspect anything?" Sandy couldn't be bothered to explain. After fruitless searching, she snapped in frustration. "What do we do now? All the money we took from him was gambled away by you. You're blaming me. How was I supposed to know he'd lose his memory?" The man on the phone sounded irritable. Who could have guessed that Tiffany would be so useless, killing herself just like that? And Bart too. Sandy stomped her foot angrily. Sandy's eyes suddenly turned vicious. "That bitch survived the car crash and clung to life for 5 years. What tough luck. Don't be angry. Once Bart gets that 50 billion, we'll quit." The man comforted her. She nodded helplessly and walked away in her high heels, unnoticed by her. The man's fingers twitched slightly on the hospital bed behind. Adrian had a very, very long dream. In the dream, there was no car accident. Tiffany, nor did she lose her sight. They remained deeply in love, with two adorable and well-behaved children who were both sweet and sensible. Yet in the dream, he couldn't feel any happiness at all. He knew all of this was false. Tiffany's accident had struck him too hard, to the point where even his brain's protective mechanisms offered no comfort. Just when Adrian's will to survive was about to extinguish, he heard Sandy's voice. In that very instant, all his memories came flooding back. Shock and rage consumed him entirely. The innocent Sandy he had known was now rummaging through his belongings for valuables. Her tone and words were filled with greed and malice. "So, that accidental car crash, that accidentally delivered to his bed, Sandy, that accidental face, so strikingly similar to Tiffany. Even Sandy's mannerisms, tone of speech, and preferences matched Tiffany's with uncanny consistency. But could such a coincidence truly exist in this world? And what was Bart's relationship with her? Who was the man on the phone? No, he couldn't die, absolutely not. Adrian, a flush of color suddenly spread across his pale face as he struggled to open his eyes, their depths seeping with a darkness as thick as ink, filled with malevolence. He needed to uncover the truth. If all of this had been premeditated, then someone would have to pay the price, and he, too, would seek out Tiffany to confess his sins once everything was over. Adrian picked up the phone. "Anderson, use your information network to help me look someone up." Back when Sandy first appeared by his side, he had investigated her identity and found no issues. That left only one possibility. Part of his information network had been blocked. Anderson was a top-tier hacker he'd met in South Africa. There wasn't a piece of information he couldn't uncover once he set his mind to it. This time, he was determined to uncover the full truth of the matter. If Tiffany had been set up, then he wouldn't hesitate to show no mercy. Northern Europe, the manor, The sound of the piano drifted through the lush, blooming tulips, scattering softly in all directions, amidst the flowers. A graceful young girl gently rose on her tiptoes, her limbs moving with a beauty and strength that was utterly fluid. The piano's melody grew more impassioned. Tiffany gradually quickened her spinning. Like a dancing sprite, but gradually, her movements grew slightly sluggish, and fine beads of sweat began to glisten on her forehead. It seemed to sense her struggle, as the piano gradually began to ease its tempo once more. "Nick, keep going. I can do this." Tiffany gritted her teeth, hearing this. The man behind the piano didn't hesitate for a moment before quickening the rhythm. Nick trusted Tiffany completely. He loved her, not just for her radiant and peerless beauty, but even more for her indomitable spirit. She was no delicate flower in a greenhouse. As long as it didn't harm her health, he would spare no effort to support her and fulfill her every need. Sure enough, Tiffany's movements remained perfectly on beat as she completed the entire dance following the original rhythm of the music. As the dance ended, she held her final pose, chest rising and falling as she exhaled in quick, light breaths. Nick, the admiration in his eyes lingered as his gaze remained fixed on her, unwilling to look away. Tiffany waved her hand in front of his eyes. "Hey, mister." Nick snapped back to reality and caught her fingertips in his hand. "You're beautiful, and you danced wonderfully, far better than I ever imagined." He was telling the truth. Tiffany's movements were so polished they didn't seem like someone who hadn't performed on stage for 5 years. She must have practiced diligently in private. But for the past 5 years, her eyes couldn't see. No one knows how many times she fell, how many breakdowns and moments of despair she endured, to finally achieve this dance. "Tiffany, wait here for me. I'll go get your slippers." Nick, as he rose to leave, Tiffany caught the unmistakable tenderness in his eyes, and it gently touched the softest part of her heart. He was always like this, able to see past her strong exterior to the vulnerability beneath. "He's still as attentive as he was 5 years ago," she murmured softly. Wade stood behind Tiffany, his head bowing even lower. "Master is only like this when he's with you. The rest of the time, he was that ruthless and merciless mafia don, even bordering on brutality." She was lost in thought after hearing those words and didn't notice the man had returned, now kneeling down to change her shoes himself. His warm palm covered the sole of her foot. Tiffany blushed crimson with embarrassment. "Nick," she gasped softly, trying to pull her foot back, but it remained firmly cradled in his grasp. The feet of a ballet dancer are never particularly beautiful. The more dedicated the dancer, the more scars and calluses accumulate on their feet, and hers were especially pronounced. Nick moved gently, and before she even noticed any discomfort, he had already slipped her into a pair of slippers. "Thank you, Nick, but you really didn't have to." It wasn't that she didn't understand Nick's feelings, nor was she indifferent to him, but as early as 5 years ago, she had already let him down once for various reasons. How could she now, after being hurt by another man, calmly accept his pure and blazing love? The man gently straightened the hem of her dress with gentlemanly care. "I do all this willingly, needing no repayment or response from you." His eyes brimmed with profound affection. "Just standing here, seeing you safe and sound, that alone is the greatest gift heaven could give me." Tiffany gazed fixedly at his handsome features, her eyes growing slightly moist. "But I've lived with someone else for 5 years. Tiffany, you know I don't care about that." Tiffany pressed her lips together. "Nick, I'm afraid I might hurt you. What if I can't move on from what happened before? What if I can't love someone properly again?" Her voice grew fainter, her eyelashes fluttering uneasily. Nick responded to her words with a quiet chuckle instead. Tiffany froze. "What are you laughing at?" "Tiffany, you don't need to worry about these things. It's okay if you can't move on. It's okay if you can't love. Nothing matters. I can accept all of you, at any time. If I make you uncomfortable, you can immediately say no to me." "Okay." He gently tucked her wind-blown hair behind her ear. "With me, all you need to be is yourself." Tiffany paused. "Just myself." Nick planted a kiss on the back of her hand. "Exactly." On the other side, in Harbor City, Adrian had already obtained the information Anderson had retrieved for him. He inserted the USB drive into his computer, and a full row of videos popped up. The man's face turned ashen after watching video after video. All color drained from his face as his trembling hands on his lap dialed a phone number. "The 50 billion transferred to Bart. It's time to retrieve it." "Yes, Mr. Adrian. I'll handle it immediately. Bring Sandy here. Tell her I've regained my memory and want to see her." The man's face was shrouded in darkness, clouded with gloom as a sudden, crazed smile twisted his lips. An hour later, Sandy burst through the door, her face alight with joy. "Adrian, you're awake, thank goodness." A faint shadow flickered imperceptibly in the man's eyes, yet his face wore a tender, affectionate smile. "Darling, you're here." You really remember. She threw herself into his arms, pouting with grievance. Do you know how heartbroken and terrified I've been these past few days? I know everything. Sandy pouted playfully while stealing glances at Adrian's expression from the corner of her eye. Seeing no change in the man's demeanor, she finally let out a sigh of relief. Then, with a sly glint in her eyes, she probed, Adrian, you didn't actually transfer those 50 billion to Bart, did you? Adrian sighed. His brow furrowed with worry. Yes, all 50 billion has already been deposited into Bart's account. There's no way to recover it now. No, Sandy almost blurted out. She had just received a call from Bart that morning, saying none of the money had reached his account. But Adrian's words didn't seem like lies either. Could it be that Bart was deceiving her? Did he want to pocket all that money for himself? As soon as this thought emerged, Sandy involuntarily shuddered. Bart has always been cunning and deceitful. If he were to do something like this, it wouldn't be entirely impossible. As she was lost in thought, she suddenly spotted Bart behind the one-way glass of the CEO's office. He was following Adrian's assistant, grinning smugly, hardly looking like someone with a grudge against the Aries family. Sandy stiffened. What is he doing here? Oh. You mean Bart? He said he had a secret to tell me in person and refused to say it over the phone. Adrian sighed. Baby, wait here for me. I'm going to meet him. Sandy watched the man's retreating figure, her unease growing stronger. Bart had already gotten the money, yet now he appeared here again. Knowing him as she did, he must have another scheme in mind. But what bargaining chips did he have left? She looked down at her belly and suddenly widened her eyes. Shouting at the man who was about to leave the room. Wait. Hearing this, Adrian paused his steps, his fingers slightly curling at his sides. What's wrong, baby? With his back turned to Sandy, his eyes were filled with indifference. I have something to tell you. It's about Bart. Sandy's voice trembled. He turned around with a gentle smile. All right, baby. Go ahead. For the next hour, he sat quietly on the bench, listening to Sandy spin her fabricated tale of how she had been forced, threatened, and terrorized by Bart. Without acknowledging the tear-streaked woman kneeling on the floor, Adrian kept his eyelids drooping languidly, idly fiddling with a peace knot in his hand. If Sandy could calm down and take a closer look at the peace talisman in his hand, he would realize it was the very one Tiffany had kowtowed step by step for Adrian, bowing at each of the 999 steps of Chunghua Temple to obtain for him. Sandy's sobs gradually quieted as she clutched the man's pant leg, pouting in grievance. How dare he treat me like this? Adrian, you must avenge me. As soon as the words left her mouth, a mechanical boom sounded behind her as a door slid open. She instinctively turned to look, then let out a blood-curdling scream. Ah, there was Bart, hanging mid-air with a rope around his neck, his face turning purple and his eyes bulging out. President Wang. You heard it too. My wife says you bullied her. Bart shook his head with difficulty, trembling as he raised a finger to point at Sandy. She's lying to you. Adrian raised an eyebrow, signaling to let the man down. You bitch, how dare you frame me? Bart roared as he lunged at Sandy, grabbing her hair and slapping her hard across the face several times. The room instantly erupted with curses and screams so loud they nearly lifted the roof. You slut. Have you forgotten how you stripped naked and begged for me in my bed? Bullshit, Sandy screamed, cutting him off as she clung to Adrian's ankle. It was you who tried to bribe me to harm Adrian. I never agreed to it. Adrian, please believe me. Woo-woo. Adrian curved his lips into a barely perceptible smile. Of course I believe you. Baby, get up quickly. Don't hurt our child. Bart widened his eyes, suddenly remembering something. The child, Mr. Adrian. That child isn't yours. Don't be fooled by this bitch. Adrian frowned. What did you say? You're full of shit. Sandy, having been exposed, bristled like a cat with its fur standing on end, shedding all pretense of innocence and fragility. Pointing at Bart, she screamed, You motherless bastard, dare to spout another word of nonsense. Nonsense. He sneered darkly. Sandy, you didn't know, did you? Just one amniocentesis is all it takes to prove whose child you're really carrying. Sandy's pupils contracted sharply. She genuinely hadn't known. She instinctively looked at Adrian's reaction, only to see the man staring at her abdomen with an awkward expression. Instantly, a wave of overwhelming panic engulfed her. This child certainly wasn't Adrian's, but Bart's. If this were truly discovered, all her carefully laid plans would be ruined. She closed her eyes, as if steeling herself for some decisive action. Bart, since you're being heartless, don't blame me for being unjust. Gritting her teeth, she spilled all of Bart's dirty secrets, confidential matters, and shameful schemes like pouring beans from a sack. With tears streaming down her face, Adrian sobbed. Adrian, I've been hiding by his side, doing all this for you. Bart's face turned as purple as liver. actually laughing in disbelief at Sandy's shamelessness. Everything had been exposed anyway, so what was the point of keeping secrets for her? He spilled it all, how Sandy had gotten plastic surgery and deliberately approached Adrian. The two began brawling again, hurling curses at each other non-stop. Adrian sat leisurely in his leather chair, puffing on an expensive cigar, enjoying the spectacular dog-eat-dog spectacle. After who knows how long, Bart finally realized something. Glaring at the still hysterical Sandy slapping at him, he couldn't take it anymore and slapped her back. Idiot! Sandy lay disheveled on the ground. Gasping for breath, seeing Adrian's cold, indifferent gaze, her heart constricted violently. Why you did this on purpose? He had led her to falsely accuse Bart first, then provoked him to watch them tear into each other. Adrian, believe me, I'm carrying your child. The man's raven feather lashes lifted slightly. Take her for an amniocentesis. His tone was light, as if discussing something trivial. A line of white-coated figures filed in. Sandy gagged and dragged out between them. Adrian, you despicable scoundrel, Bart cursed as a team of customs officers burst in, wielding an arrest warrant and speaking in fluent London-accented English. Bart, you're involved in unlawful confinement and intentional harm. Please come with us. The snow fell urgently as Adrian stood on the porch, holding the amniocentesis report in his hand. The words "no blood relation" pierced his eyeballs like shards of ice. Next. The assistant brought in the remaining evidence found in the castle's mailbox. The man stared at the madness-inducing spice test report for a long time, his heart feeling as if it were being repeatedly crushed and twisted by invisible hands. That so-called apology animal taming performance was actually a deliberate murder attempt targeting Tiffany. He had even ignored her refusal and resistance, forcibly carrying her down to face punishment. Causing the girl he loved to be knocked down by the beast, her ribs broken, nearly losing her life while he stood not far away, tightly shielding Sandy. And how many more ways had he wronged Tiffany, for the sake of Sandy and the child in her womb that shared no blood relation with him? He first deceived her countless times with excuses about company matters, then instructed doctors not to cure her eyes, leaving her to spend 5 fear-filled years in darkness. While Sandy nestled in his arms coquettishly, the girl he truly loved was abandoned by him on the mountain, buried under an avalanche. He had personally killed his and Tiffany's first child. The man's upright frame hunched over as an ashen pallor spread across his face. He scrolled down, only to see something that shattered him completely. It was an abortion report. The document stated the fetus had been over 2 months old. Severe internal injuries had caused fetal asphyxia, while external trauma had induced the miscarriage. No, how could this happen? Adrian suddenly lost all strength, collapsing to his knees on the ground. This means that when she was kidnapped by Bart, she was already pregnant with his child, and because he was concerned about the child in Sandy's womb, that child of Bart's ended up causing the death of his own second biological child. With a phut sound, a mouthful of blood suddenly sprayed from his lips, staining the pure white snow crimson. Chassel, startled, cried out, "Adrian!" He quickly stepped forward to support the staggering figure. "Adrian, what's wrong with you?" Yet the blood from the man's mouth showed no signs of stopping, instead gushing out more and more. Blood stained his handsome brows and eyes as he chuckled deliriously. "Adrian, oh Adrian, is this what you meant by always being good to her? Is this what you meant by always shielding her behind you, being her eyes? The one who hurt her was you, the one who exposed her to danger was you, the one who plunged her into darkness was you." He pressed his forehead against the rough, cold ground, kowtowing again and again. "Tiffany, I've wronged you." Chassel watched this scene, his eyes stinging with unshed tears. How had the beloved couple of their youth come to this irreparable point, separated by the boundary between life and death? A deranged figure suddenly dashed out of the villa, screaming as she ran toward Adrian. Doctors wielding syringes and scalpels chased close behind her. Sandy had disheveled hair, her once delicate makeup now smeared into chaotic patches across her face. "Adrian, you can't do this to me. My feelings for you are genuine." She clung to Adrian's pant leg. "Have you forgotten? You said I was the woman you loved most. You even named our child." He kicked you, remember? A sharp slap across her face abruptly silenced her incessant words. "Drag her away and throw her out into the snow." Adrian snapped furiously. "The suffering and pain that Tiffany once endured, you should feel it too." Sandy collapsed on the ground, wiping blood from the corner of her mouth, then suddenly burst into hysterical laughter. "Adrian, you blame me for what happened back then. I wasn't the one who harmed her, it was you. You gave me the power to hurt her. Your attitude silently allowed me to do it. Now she's dead, and it's all your fault." Chassel watched helplessly as Adrian's face grew paler, almost turning transparent. He furrowed his brows and roared, What are you all standing around for? Drag her away." The surroundings fell silent once more. Adrian stretched out his hand in a daze, catching a glistening snowflake. "It's snowing." Leaning on Chassel's shoulder, he murmured, "Chassel, I miss her so much. That little girl still holds a grudge against me. She won't even visit me in my dreams." He forced a smile uglier than tears. "The heavens say even if I die and go looking for her, I'll only end up in Avicii hell. I'll never see my angel again." Chassel covered his face in agony as his phone slipped from his pocket, revealing a notification. The Nordic ballet queen Tiffany returns to the stage for a public performance. Countdown. 3 days. Adrian's gaze fixed on the screen, his eyes suddenly flashing with an astonishing, peculiar brilliance. Chassel startled at the sight. "This isn't Tiffany. Just someone who looks like her." The man turned a deaf ear, muttering like a madman, "I recognize her. It must be her. It must be her. Tiffany isn't dead." Northern Europe. Nick held Tiffany's hand as they strolled through the streets of Milan. Fluffy snowflakes swirled down, kept at bay by the umbrella in his hand. Not a single snowflake touching Tiffany's expensive and luxurious wool coat. "Tiffany, what would you like to eat later?" Tiffany recalled the French cuisine she'd been eating recently, her pretty face scrunching up like a steamed bun. "I don't want French food anymore. I want to eat." Yet the words she meant to say never left her lips, as a layer of dull dust seemed to settle over her eyes. The girl lowered her head, her eyelashes fluttering uneasily. "Never mind, I don't feel like eating anything." She remembered the shepherd's purse dumplings and osmanthus cakes her grandmother used to make, flavors she had been longing for, but could no longer taste. Nick gently touched her ear. "Ah, what a pity. I even had shepherd's purse and osmanthus flowers airlifted here." "Really? How did you know I was craving them?" Tiffany threw herself into his arms, her eyes crinkling into crescent moons. "Yes, I specifically learned the Houjo style, practiced for ages before daring to show off in front of MS." "Tiffany," he smiled adoringly, mimicking mainland etiquette as he bowed playfully to the girl. "Would you honor me with your approval?" The girl covered her mouth, giggling at his antics, and quickly helped him straighten up. "Of course," she replied. Such a strikingly handsome pair naturally drew admiring glances from everyone around them. The snowy scene was as beautiful as a painting, yet to some eyes, it was unbearably glaring. "Tiffany," Adrian rushed out, trying to pull Tiffany back into his arms. "How can you be so intimate with another man? You're my wife." Yet before he could even touch the hem of her garment, he was stopped a meter away by the bodyguards flanking Nick and Tiffany. "Let me go, let me go." His struggles were futile, only shattering his veneer of dignity into pieces on the ground. Tiffany and Nick stood at a distance, watching coldly. "Sir, I'm afraid you've mistaken someone. This is my wife," Nick mocked in fluent French. As if to confirm his words, the girl tightly grasped Nick's hand, her gaze toward Adrian as cold as ice. "I don't know you." Her voice was like frozen steel. Adrian's heart felt as if it were being sliced apart piece by piece with a blunt knife. He shook his head. "No, you're lying. Tiffany, you're still angry with me, aren't you? You're doing this to punish me, aren't you?" Tiffany let out a light scoff and naturally planted a kiss on Nick's cheek. "We're legally married, sir. I told you I don't know you. Please leave." Adrian watched her actions, his eyes turning bloodshot as a bitter lump in his throat nearly brought tears to his eyes. "Tiffany, you can't do this to me. You can't do this to me." His voice grew hoarse, but the girl turned her face away, refusing to spare him another glance. The man beside her comfortingly squeezed her fingertips, drawing her into his embrace as he whispered, "Madam, let's go home." "No, don't go, please, Tiffany," he pleaded, disheveled as he was pinned to the ground, the snow staining his robes. "Tiffany, listen to me. I've already dealt with Sandy. I've repaid her tenfold for what she did to you. She'll suffer 1,000 times more than you ever did. And as for Bart, I've also..." Tiffany remained expressionless, her eyelashes not even fluttering as she gestured for the police. "There's a madman here. Please take him away." The police officer nodded. "Don't worry." Adrian was roughly shoved into the police car, watching helplessly as the girl he loved nestled in another man's arms. The man was planting a kiss on her forehead, his eyes brimming with tenderness. This was Adrian's first realization that the Nordic wind was so much colder than in Harbor City, piercingly frigid, almost freezing his entire being into shards of ice. Manna. Tiffany had already taken a hot shower and changed into her fluffy bear pajamas, sitting at the dining table with an expectant look. Before long, Nick brought out the shepherd's purse dumplings and osmanthus cakes. Her eyes widened instantly. The dumplings were plump and perfectly rounded with thin wrappers and generous fillings, while the osmanthus cakes glistened translucent, their floral sweetness lingering in the air. Wow, amazing. She couldn't wait to pull out the chopsticks she'd prepared in advance, Grabbing a piece and stuffing it into her mouth, her eyes suddenly lit up. So delicious. Nick smiled dotingly. Eat slowly, little messy eater. He reached out to wipe the osmanthus petals from her face. Tiffany's face instantly turned bright red. The man teased, legally married couple. The girl raised a plate to cover her face, her voice muffled. Hello, Mr. Nick. You've lost something. What is it? Your shamelessness. Nick gave a helpless smile and ruffled her hair, never expecting the girl to suddenly rise up and plant a kiss on his forehead. It's delicious. Thank you, Nick. With that, she dashed off like the wind to the dance studio on the second floor. The man gazed longingly at her retreating figure and made a phone call. Wade, notify the Milan police to take good care of our friends who've come all the way from Hong Kong. Yes, master. Palermo Grand Theatre. The theatre was bustling with people coming to see the ballet, many drawn by the return of the dance prodigy Tiffany after a 5-year hiatus. Adrian limped toward the theatre entrance, step by painful step, yet just as he struggled through the crowded flow of people and reached the reception area, he was stopped by a waiter. Sir, you can't go in. Why? He frowned in displeasure. This was his only chance to see Tiffany again. The theatre didn't even require invitations. All ticket-holding audience members were allowed entry. To their surprise, the waiter produced a photograph, carefully comparing it to Adrian's face before solemnly declaring, due to involvement in malicious harassment of our dance troupe member Miss Tiffany, you have been permanently banned from the Palermo Grand Theatre. Please leave. Adrian stood frozen in place, like a man craving light in darkness who just had his last candle extinguished. No, that's not right. Let me explain. I know Tiffany. I'm her husband. The waiter's expression grew even more contemptuous. Miss Tiffany's partner is Mr. Nick. Do you take me for a fool? The French accent sounded particularly biting. Adrian hurriedly took out his phone and flipped to the wedding photo of him and Tiffany. Look. She really is my wife. Ha ha ha. We've already investigated. This woman's name is Sandy. There's a saying, passing off fish eyes as pearls, that must be referring to you, right? The waitstaff burst into laughter, their gazes at Adrian growing even more disdainful. Get lost. Don't block us from serving other customers. He was rudely shoved aside and could only press himself against the theatre window, straining to catch one last glimpse of Tiffany inside. Backstage of the theatre, Tiffany had already changed into her performance costume and was having her stage makeup applied by professional staff. It had been 5 years since she last stepped onto a theatre stage, and she still felt somewhat nervous. Taking several deep breaths, she recalled the movements and beats in her mind. The door of the dressing room swung open, and a strikingly handsome face appeared before Tiffany. What brings you here? Her face lit up with surprise. Nick grasped her slightly sweaty palm. I grew too anxious waiting ahead, and worried about my princess, so I had to come see for myself. Don't be afraid, Tiffany. I've seen how hard you've been working all this time, dancing from dawn till dusk every day, never leaving the practice room until completely exhausted. Your dancing has reached perfection. All you need to do now is enjoy the stage. His deep voice carried some magical quality that gradually calmed Tiffany's restless heart, replacing it with a welling confidence. Yes, she was ready to face new challenges, ready to embark on a new life, ready to live and strive solely for herself. What she should do is enjoy this process of reinventing herself. Having figured this out, Tiffany's gaze grew resolute. She gently hugged Nick. Thank you for always encouraging and believing in me. To her, he was more than just a lover, he was like a mentor and friend in life. It was soon time for Tiffany to take the stage. She stood behind the curtain, her eyes brimming with a galaxy of stars, quietly awaiting the grand opening of the performance. The next moment, the curtain was drawn. Dazzling lights shone upon her, and the music began to play softly. Tiffany gently opened her eyes, her toes twitching slightly, and began to spin and dance like a fairy. Those well-rehearsed movements ultimately transformed into a masterful performance, flawlessly presented to the audience, instantly igniting thunderous applause. Yet the girl on stage had completely immersed herself in her own world. She danced in the place of her dreams. Each clean and powerful movement shattering the shadows of the past. All the lights converged upon her, and the crowd's gaze was fixed on her alone. Every person in the audience held their breath, mesmerized by this breathtakingly beautiful performance. Nick's fingers flew across the piano keys, the melodious and exquisite music blending perfectly with the dance. Outside the theater, Adrian stood frozen, staring blankly at the scene before him. The snow and wind battered his body, numbing half of him, yet he didn't move an inch. The girl on stage was dazzling, beautiful, radiant, and brimming with confidence. Just like the first time he met her, it had been so long since he'd seen Tiffany like this. How did she live through these 5 years of blindness, restlessness, fear, constraint? Within that tiny castle of hers, time and again she was called by life and dreams, only to be beaten down by cruel reality. He robbed her of the right to pursue dreams after regaining sight, keeping her caged like a golden canary. Is this love, really? Adrian clung desperately to the window, not daring to look away for even a second, terrified of missing any moment of her movements or expressions. He finally realized how terribly wrong he had been, and at last understood why Tiffany no longer wished to acknowledge him. The theater emptied as the audience streamed out one after another, nearly every face wearing an expression of lingering fascination. Adrian leaned against the warm yellow streetlight, wrapping his scarf around his face, hoping to catch another glimpse of her. He overheard several people praising Tiffany's performance, remarking how after 5 years of silence, she had emerged with a steely resilience as sharp as a blade. A faint smile unconsciously curled at the corners of his lips, an inexplicable joy blooming in his heart. Before long, that graceful figure appeared before his eyes. Tiffany had changed out of her performance attire, her delicate face buried in a thick cashmere scarf as she happily dashed into the heavy snowfall. "Nick, it's snowing again." She spun round and round in the snow, then excitedly threw herself into the man's arms. "I love it here so much." Nick brushed the snowflakes from her hair. "Is it because it's always snowing here?" Tiffany turned back, slightly surprised. "Of course not, just because of that. I love it here because you're here." The man behind the pillar shuddered violently at these words. Nick froze momentarily. "Tiffany," a gentle yet radiant smile played at the corners of her lips. "All right, I now officially declare that you may propose to me." "How did you know?" Nick widened his eyes. He had indeed prepared the engagement ring and other things, but he wanted to leave all the choices to Tiffany, not wanting her to feel even the slightest hint of coercion or reluctance. But he never expected that the person he loved would actually say those words to him in person. "Am I dreaming, Tiffany?" Tiffany gently shook her head, burying her face in his chest and nuzzling against him. "Nick, it was you who supported me in pursuing my dreams, let me be myself, and gave me the courage to start anew. It wasn't me, it was you." The girl stood on tiptoe and planted a light kiss at the corner of his lips, only to be pulled firmly into his embrace as he deepened the kiss. The unique sandalwood scent of the man intertwined with the jasmine fragrance of the woman. The snow fell slowly, gently, as if reluctant to disturb this beautiful moment. Adrian covered his face and slowly crouched down, tears spilling through his fingers. This time, his feelings for Tiffany weren't possessive love, but endless remorse. He regretted losing the one he loved. "Tiffany, I'm so sorry," he murmured, confessing his regrets over and over in the snow. Tiffany and Nick had just left when Adrian received a call from across the ocean. Chassel anxiously asked him, "Adrian, have you found Tiffany? I saw the latest reports that Ballet Diva is now famous. I remember Tiffany loved ballet too. Could it really be her?" Adrian sat at the theater entrance, his slender fingers tracing the face of the girl on the poster over and over. He didn't answer Chassel's barrage of questions, only silently repented in his heart. Suddenly, a tall and slender figure stopped before him, casting a shadow under the streetlight. He looked up and saw that strikingly handsome yet intimidating face. It was Nick. "Did you deliberately let me see Tiffany being intimate with you?" Adrian narrowed his eyes. Nick raised an eyebrow. "No need for pretense. Such things happen every day." Adrian turned livid, retorting stubbornly, "Though Tiffany loves you now, after all the time I've spent with her, who holds more weight in her heart remains to be seen." Unexpectedly, Nick wasn't angered but instead nodded. "Is that so? If only Mr. Adrian possessed as much skill as he does confidence." "What do you mean?" Nick lit a cigar, exhaling a smoke ring with elegant refinement. "How do you think you disposed of Bart so quickly, with those amateurish tricks of your men, Mr. Adrian?" Adrian's expression changed. "Those customs officers, they're your people." Nick didn't answer him, turning to leave instead. "Bart, and that woman, I don't trust leaving them to Mr. Adrian. After all, the punishment they deserve goes far beyond what you've arranged. As for you, Mr. Adrian, I naturally have a special gift prepared as well." Adrian froze slightly. "What?" A bad premonition stirred in his heart. The next second, Adrian's phone was bombarded with text messages. Dense clusters of messages all read, "Ari's family's capital chain has broken. Market value evaporated by 90%. The man strode away with his long legs, casually leaving behind a remark, "Mr. Adrian, I hope you won't disturb me and my wife again, or I can't guarantee the remaining 10% won't vanish immediately." Adrian stood frozen in place, icicles forming on his eyelashes and eyebrows. He saw a graceful figure step out of that car and take Nick's hand. Adrian suddenly had a premonition. This might be the last time he would see her. From then on, his world would no longer have that radiant, vivacious girl. He could only yearn and gaze at Tiffany countless times from across the distant ocean. Staggering, he mustered all his strength and ran toward Tiffany. Tiffany, Tiffany. The woman's figure paused slightly, her delicate profile appearing even colder against the snow and ice. Tiffany, I beg you, just look back at me once, okay? Consider it leaving me a memory to hold on to during these remaining days of atonement. Adrian waited expectantly for her to turn around, but the woman's figure merely hesitated for a moment before calmly taking Nick's arm and continuing forward without a second glance. Tiffany didn't look back even once. With her spine straight, she strode forward resolutely and decisively. Adrian, I told you, I won't love you anymore. I won't stay for you anymore. Snowflakes gently fell upon her and Nick, just like this, walking together until their hair turns white. Tiffany was proposed to on a warm and gentle spring day, just because she once casually mentioned to Nick that she wanted to wear beautiful dresses on every important day of her life, so he dedicated this day to the spring of the Amalfi Coast. There weren't many guests at this proposal, only their closest friends. The seawater under the sunset was dyed orange-red, reflecting on her face like a natural blush. Nick held the diamond ring, kneeling on one knee, his deep blue eyes fixed on Tiffany. Never leaving her for a moment, he adored his princess just as he had 5 years ago. Loyalty, respect, and devotion. Tiffany had now received the invitation from the London Grand Theatre once again, offering her the position of principal dancer. This time, she firmly grasped the opportunity. Just like now, she reached out and slipped on the ring that symbolized true love. Fingers intertwined, they embraced amidst the cheers of the crowd and the rhythmic crashing of the waves, setting off once more. To pursue her dreams and love, Tiffany held Nick's hand as they walked side by side, getting drenched in snowfall after snowfall, watching blossom after blossom unfold, until their hair turned white. The end.